Hi, Growth Mindset Gang. I am so excited because we have another wonderful guest with us today on the podcast, Miss Lenka Schulze, and we're going to be talking about all things intuition and spirituality and how to understand the difference between maybe anxiety and intuition, connecting to our quote unquote the women's intuition, and really just reconnecting with the truest parts of our souls within our spirituality. So, Lenka, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Do you want to introduce yourself to the Growth Mindset Gang?
Again, thank you so much for having me. It is always a pleasure to talk about the subject that I am so passionate about, and I appreciate that you've given me the time and a spot in your show. My name is Lenka, and I really like to just end it with that because I believe that underneath all of these titles and all these things, we are just really just a vibrational energy of kind of almost like a resonance. And you connect with me because of that, not because what I have accomplished or what I have studied in my life. But if people do want to know that, um, I have journeyed in the world of intuition pretty much like everybody. I think it's just a birthright, all of us, but me probably more so because I have been growing up in Eastern Europe and grew up in communism, and we have not been allowed to be part of any religion. So that all kind of opens up the vessel, to something else because we are just naturally curious beings. And me being a curious child, I was always interested in something that is not easily explainable. And so around me, they were the fortune tellers and tarot readers and healers. And so I have been, journeying on that path and gotten myself into a position of becoming a medical intuitive, which I don't do anymore. And I am an author of books. I have my doctorate degree. And I just would like to bring intuition into the mainstream, into the nitty-gritty daily life where that power of intuition can benefit us on daily basis.
Yeah. And I love that because that's so important to bring it to the mainstream because I think that right now our lives are very loud and very chaotic. We have a lot of distractions, right? We got the TV, we got social media, we got a whole bunch of screens right in front of us, which really distracts us. And then I think a lot of people get very confused because we have so much information, like overload all the time because of the access that we have. We go, well, what is my truth? What is the truth, right? In general. So I love that you talked about really honing in on connecting with your true self. And that way, when you connect with your true self, then you're able to listen and understand, right? What is going to be true and right for you. So one of the first things I kind of want to get into, because I hear so many different things of like, what is intuition? So could you just give us, a brief description of what do you think or what is intuition to you?
Well, intuition is just a word, first of all.
Yeah.
Okay. But if we kind of understanding that we need words to put something in some kind of a box in our brain. So it is a communication with our soul. And in trends, if you look at that kind of the etymology of the word, it comes from the intuary, which means from within. It's the information coming from within. It's not from the outside world. It's from within us. So it's kind of like that inner communication that's tapping into the subtle world outside of us.
Yeah.
And again, it's not about, bringing in intellect. It's the intelligence that is all around us that we tap into. It's the intelligence of the subtle world of the nature, let's say, or words that is not spoken. You see, they're in the ethers.
Yeah.
So that's what we are tapping into the unknown, the invisible realm.
Yeah. And that's great to really talk about because I think a lot of us get trapped in the mundaneness of the world, right? And we often causes us like to disconnect from like that metaphysical, right? The energies, the vibrations around us. Because us as human beings, right? We have a soul and that soul has energy. And I always like to tell people that you ever realize if you go into a space or you're talking to a person for the first time, you have this like innate feeling. And some people might say, oh, that's just in my head. Perhaps I'm overthinking it. But I learned to, when I was kind of going through my own intuition, reconnecting with that part of me, was, well, hold on, why is my body making me feel this way? Like that connection, that little communication of something might be off, something might be wrong here. And usually, well, at least in my own experience, is the intuition, the body tells me before the mind. Body's like, whoa, 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 hold on, there's something maybe off here. You should be paying attention to something else. And that's all due to, right, the vibrations and the frequencies that we as humans, right, send out that we don't even see, right? Like the ether, like you talked about. And I think that's so cool because when you meet someone, we kind of always known this, but always said it was quote unquote the woo woo, where it was like, oh, I just didn't match the vibes, quote unquote, of somebody, right? I just had a bad feeling about that person or a bad feeling about that situation. Those are real things because of the frequencies that come out of us. I mean, we're, energetic beings, even our own emotions, right, emit different types of energy because that's just energy in motion is emotion. And so once you kind of start breaking down the barriers of, okay, this is the mundane world, but there's also another world that's just a little unseen. But I think finally it's really cool that the science is catching up to it because sometimes people are like, well, I want the physical proof. Well, the science is actually really catching up with understanding that there's vibrations and frequencies between us as humans. So it's no longer quote unquote the woo woo anymore. And so if people are listening and they're like, okay, I kind of think I'm starting to maybe feel my intuition again, where like I can resonate with, oh, like if I meet someone and something feels off, that's like the little inkling. What advice would you have for people to kind of disconnect from the loudness, right? Disconnect from the distractions and really hone in and getting quiet in order to not only really reconnect with our intuition, but also really reconnect with the soul that's in.
That's a great question. I'm going to kind of piggyback on what you were
Yeah,
saying
go ahead.
about the science. The Heart Math Institute, there's so much information out there. And they
Mm-hmm.
did a studies that I mentioned in my book. And the study showed that your feelings, your heart
Mm-hmm.
intelligence actually knows things 6 seconds before your brain. So they took the monitor and they showed a different kind of pictures,
Mm-hmm.
and the pictures would stimulate certain emotions in you of fear or happiness and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So the feelings of the heart reacted 6 seconds before the image appeared. So if you just take that, that's
Mm-hmm.
huge
Yeah.
because the intelligence of intuition is really in your heart. It's not in your brain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
awesome.
follow up with your what did you say? How do you tap into it? That was the
Yeah.
question.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's kind of like plugging yourself back into the electricity, like you trying
Yeah.
to plug in your phone.
Mm-hmm.
It has always been there. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
plug is always there. So why you even want to unplug? It's almost like realization that you are always in it. You always in it, but to a certain level. And if you recognize that, the recognition of it will make that muscle stronger. So
Mm-hmm.
it comes with these little tiny validations. But as I wrote about it in my book, there's a certain ingredients that will make you really step into the intuitive self more than others. And a couple of them is self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't trust
Mm-hmm.
yourself, that's another one, trust and self-esteem. So if you don't trust yourself, you're not going to be able to build on that.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the trust, it's the trust in what you're getting is correct.
Mm-hmm.
And trust it first and then doubt it later if that doesn't come as validation later. But
Mm-hmm.
trust it first and act on that. And then, like I heard you saying that you are big into journaling. I believe that journaling will also make your muscles stronger because you write down and you create the neuroplasticity of that behavior. Like, oh, I was guessing what outfit Mary's going to wear, and I was right. It was green, or I was wondering what car first going to come into the intersection, and so when we write down to these silly things, we
Mm-hmm.
make our intuition stronger, and especially when we recognize it.
Mm-hmm.
That will go back into, okay, like it's almost like a reverse engineering. You go back
Yeah.
like, okay, how did I get that intuition? Was it my gut feeling? Was it just knowing? Was it a sensing feeling? All of these things will make you, again, be more aware of those sensations,
Mhm.
and and then you can build on it.
Yeah, and I think that's really useful because what you have to do is that helps you become very observant and very aware of like the life around you. I think a lot of us are very distracted because our heads are just always in our phones or always looking at a screen. We're not paying attention and being observant of the life, the thoughts, the feelings, the behaviors that are around us or that we even exhibit. So when you're going into this practice, right, it's time to like put the phone down, right? And pay attention to the world around you that not only do right us as humans have the frequencies, but like you mentioned a little bit before, it's like the nature has the frequencies.
Mhm.
Notice when you go on a hike, right? The different types of feelings and emotions that come up, the thoughts that come up, because it's all throughout synchroncies, right? We always forget that we're a part of nature as well. We always say, oh no, there's nature, then there's us. We're still a part of nature. So that's why when we even go to certain places like nature, that we feel, right, that connection between us as humans and then the nature that's surrounding us and being so observant. I think that's one of the key things that helped. And, like you said, journaling kind of helps you kind of get to know yourself better and be more observant because
Mhm.
people are like, well, how do I even connect with my intuition? Well, first you got to connect with yourself, right? Like you said, and have that trust and that self esteem. And what comes with that is finding maybe evidence and examples within your life that is the validation of perhaps your intuition. It was
Mhm.
actually kind of funny where it's like a little counterintuitive, but there's been plenty of things on like social media where it's like, oh, the intuition test. Have you seen those where it's like, I'm thinking of a color or what have you? Think about it. Let me know like what you think. But even if we might be a little still distracted with those, but even if those pop up, like take a look, right? And sit within, maybe you can guess the color if you want, if that's like your first opening to connecting with your intuition. But yeah, I love how you said like very easy, simple things is just going throughout your day, see if you can hone in and sense different things that are maybe coming up that if you were distracted and not honing in on it, that you wouldn't even realize. And I have so many people talk to me too about intuition where they're like, you know, I think it's intuition and I think I had this feeling coming up, but then I'm also like, but is this anxiety, right? There's always this kind of teeter between what's the difference between the two. And so, is there any types of like things that jump out where it's like, what's the difference between intuition or someone's anxiety?
Mhm. Yes, I would like to go back into the self-esteem and
Mm-hmm.
then the trust. And as I have listened to your podcast, you were talking about therapists and
Mm-hmm.
therapy. There's a lot of digging to if you are
Mm-hmm.
feeling like, oh, I'm not intuitive or I don't know how to connect with myself. Go back because somebody took your self-esteem, which is the power within you, to trust
Mm-hmm.
yourself. So where was that? Could be very, very subtle as something like your mom was more concerned about you being a nice girl
Mm-hmm.
versus you trusting you saying, I don't want to go to that play date. I really don't like that family. Please don't leave me there, mom. Or I don't like Uncle Bob. I don't want to sit next to him because that see, so when we trust that child, we building that trust for themselves and they looking up to us as that guiding light to because we become, we are born with that, right? It's our
Yeah.
birthright. But if somebody comes and starts skewing that, our
Mm-hmm.
compass, our inner compass is off. And
Mm-hmm.
then when it's off, we don't know where it is. Like we lost that sense. And same thing with is you are a teacher. Like there's a lot of things that have been changed in curriculum. Before it was right, now it's wrong. So, but
Mm-hmm.
even in mathematical calculations, like if you are going with the answer and you don't show the teacher how you came up with it, it will not be marked 100%. So that
Mm-hmm.
we are teaching in our schools to not trust our intuitive senses, how to get
Mm-hmm.
the answers, because the answers are into the universal consciousness. So the
Mm-hmm.
teachers are only following what they're supposed to be
Right.
teaching. But the
Mm-hmm.
child might have information beyond the teacher, beyond the curriculum. That's what's called the evolution. So
Mm-hmm.
going back into those bases and seeing like, okay, where did I lost that? Because if you ask your mom or dad, or grandparents if they're around and say, what kind of child was I? Like really, before I became the age goer, you see,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you were the stinker and you were always causing trouble and coming up with some ideas or taking things apart completely. completely to find out how things work. So this is the intuitive senses that we were building up. So again, going back into the internal compass and see where did I lose it? It was not that the loved ones around us wanted us to be disconnected. They meant well, but going back, it will really do a lot of healing and getting back the trust and the self-esteem, because the self-esteem is sitting in our gut area, right? A lot of people have issues with the gut.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It is like they don't know how to stand in themselves and stand for what they believe. All of that has been taken away from them. So going back to that, it is very essential for intuition. And how is anxiety and intuition differ? It's exactly that, is that going back into the intuition is very subtle. It's like a nice nudging. It doesn't have interest. If you ask a question or you're wondering about something, it doesn't come like a fire truck with the sirens. It doesn't do that. If I go back into the primal intuition, which is something that keeps you alive, this is again in us, that is not, yeah, that's the siren, but it's almost like a kicking in your booty, and it will just eject you. It's just like it's not even thought about the fire truck. You're already out of the room. That's kind of very primal into
It's kind of like, yeah, that fight or flight sort of thing.
Yes,
That's what we get into.
yes,
Yep,
and
those
it's
instincts.
instinct slash intuition. But what I'm talking about is anxiety feels, how I like to look at anxiety, it's a pressure cooker
Yeah.
that the lid wants to come off and blow open, right? And it feels like there's just too much of energy, that is not, it has not been utilized to create, because we are creative beings. So it's kind of, it's squashed inside of us. So once we open up that lid and just look at it like, okay, what is this all about? Like you were mentioning in your podcast, then you will see it. Intuition is different. Intuition just comes on and not like kind of somebody's like knocking on your shoulder and just whispers something and letting you go. It's a free will thing. And it comes again and it comes again gently. It comes in often it comes in, if you're not paying attention, in forms of books, forms of conversations, forms of songs, forms of big, huge billboards, you pass in it. So it will be like, oh, and then if you take notice of that, it will repeat itself. See, anxiety is just like, you can't stand that energy. It's just like so boiling inside. That's not intuition at all. Intuition is just very subtle.
Yeah. And, in my own experience too, and I heavily resonate with what you said, the intuition is more of like a warm, calming sense, right? At least within my own body when I experience it, where it feels like you said, like kind of in the stomach, like in the womb, like that kind of area. It's warm and it's inviting. Where if it's anxiety, it's very much in the chest and like the head, at least for me. And yeah, it's like that panic, the, heart's racing, palms are sweating, like that sort of thing. And so I love that you said that that's the big difference, like that pressure cooker, right? Because if it's something that's anxiety, it's kind of like this fear based, right? It's scary, it's alarming, and you're consumed by that thought. I love how you said with intuition, just these little taps here and there, little subtle reminders of things. It kind of comes in waves, where anxiety is like a tsunami, where this huge wave comes over you and you're completely just encompassed by those ruminating thoughts. And so, like you said before, like getting into journaling where you can write out these thoughts. And once you're able to kind of see them on paper and create this internal dialogue, you're able to discern. Like, I always ask myself, like, what's the truth in this? If I'm trying to figure out if it's like intuition or anxiety, I'm always like, is this based in truth or is this based in fear? And so when and you have to sit with yourself, it can't be like, oh, this split decision, oh, that's definitely intuition, this is definitely anxiety, right? Maybe with the more practice you can get a little bit more used to it, but it really does take you sitting down and you're having these thoughts and be like, okay, what is this supposed to mean? Let me break this down and let me discern it, and really listening to yourself and listening to the connection between, maybe how you feel within your head versus, your body. And I love that you said that people who are losing in their truth or their voice was taken away from them, and they have gut issues, right? Because that your gut is almost like your second brain. That's where your intuition, like at least for me, really comes in. And that's so true because I know so many people have gut issues. And yes, it could be like a wellness and physical thing as well. But sometimes physical symptoms have either the mindful or the spiritual symptoms within it first. And then it becomes like a physical symptom in certain cases. And so are there any other aspects within the body where it's like your body's trying to tell you through like the physical symptoms, like because you're not listening maybe to that intuition? Are there any symptoms of the body
Yes.
that pop up when we're disconnected from it?
Yes, I will go back to the anxiety. I'm not sure if we're going to be on YouTube so people can see my hands, but in the anxiety, when I was talking about the pressure cooker, there's
Mm-hmm.
so much energy
Yeah.
in you, right? So sometimes the energies are not yours. So for example, you in school, you interact with many different energies,
Yes.
and sometimes you are bringing them home. If
Yep.
it's, if it's your the children in front of you, but also the coworkers, and then you have the people that you have to answer to, and then you drive in home on a train, and then there's more people. And so we don't even realize that we come in home with all of these energies with us.
Yeah.
And every single thought of little Michael and maybe little Annette, and then we have to do something with your coworker, these thoughts are attached to energy, and the energy you bring in home. So that is what's the anxiety. So when you are sitting still and you like, okay, I talked to Annette, I already sent her email, done. Oh, I have here this coworker that could wait. And just really kind of like dissect
Yep.
these energies and clean them up. Sometimes they are unwanted, sometimes they're not even a part of your understanding. So there's many things you can clear. You do meditation, you could do sage clearing, you could do a crystal ball, you could just take a hot bath, and with the intention of you letting go what is not yours.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are, like you said, really energetic beings. And we are, we're not separate. We are kind of like, if we would have the glasses to see the web of the world, we are all interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
We are part of the big, huge web. I'm not alone sitting here. I am attached to everything and everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So, thinking you are on your own, that's really crazy. So, but making sure that you're not bringing all of this stuff with you, that's really, I feel from my own experience helping people is that anxiety has 99% to do with other
Yes.
people, other
Mm-hmm.
situations.
Yep. Yeah.
And so they're like saying like, no, I'm just going to do me. And
Mm-hmm.
then anxiety kind of like let it go because nothing is really more important than your inner peace and go connect with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Now I forgot the initial question you had for me.
Oh, the physical symptoms that can
Oh,
manifest within
yes.
us from, disconnecting from the intuition or not
Yes.
listening.
Love that question because we are divination tool, really. So
Mm-hmm.
the main aspect of intuition is based with individually with you. So let's just, you said you very connected to your gut feeling, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's how you get your information. Some people are like, oh, I really have these, these fuzzy feelings and then the goosebumps. Well, yes, because we have little hairs. And
Mm-hmm.
so when we get validated, the energy of the subtle world communicates with us through the goosebumps. So we are little antennas. We literally all the hair, these are little antennas communicating with us at all times. We constantly receiving and getting signals and sending out signals, right? So if people understand that we are literally divination tool and we will get any and all information throughout, that is just kind of a mind-boggling. I know some people like, well, I wanted to see things,
Mm-hmm.
we kind of do, we don't even realize. But it's difference between seeing and looking. Sometimes you're looking at something and you're not seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, seeing is based in symbolism.
Yes.
So you may watch a movie
Mm-hmm.
and five with your friends, and your friends will have a different view on that movie than you did. And you're like, oh, did you get that out of that movie? Did you see that symbolism, that archetypal meaning?
Mm-hmm.
And they might not. So it is also based in the level of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there are the people who close their eyes and they see literally, another realms. And
Yeah.
that's definitely very I don't want to say rare, but that's not usual what happens in a day in, day out, because that would be very confusing for us if we would have constantly images of other
Yeah.
worlds, right? You would
Hmm.
be probably in a mental institution in no time because you
Hmm.
have to constantly process things you see.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yes, and that there's also intuitive senses that we slowly kind of um, killing. Kind of. I don't like saying that word, but it's the
Hmm.
smell and taste. Because what I mean by killing is because we are bombarded by artificial smells all the time.
Yeah.
We don't even know what the true lavender is from the natural, if they like to call it, or
Mhm.
artificially created. And so when we constantly are around the artificial stuff, we
Mhm.
lose senses to connection to the natural world.
That's more
And it is also,
distractions, yeah, being added to us.
yes, and it is part of our survival, right? Because
Hmm.
we can eat something that is bad for us and we don't even know it, but our taste buds will spit it out, or we can smell it. It's rotten, we won't eat it. So it's very important that people start realizing that these artificial smells around them is also affecting their intuitive senses.
Yeah, and I agree. Like one of the simplest ways to like really reconnect in the most, daily things that we do is kind of like that getting back to basics. Like, trying to not be around artificial senses, trying not to have too much like artificial food and things like that. Because like you said, yeah, like not only does like our society really distract us into what the screens are distracting us, but it's also right our other senses as well. Like we're slowly and slowly like really disconnecting with the actual real world and the nature around us. And that's why we feel very chaotic on the inside because we're not connecting to quote unquote, right, what's real anymore. We
Mhm.
kind of live a very synthetic and artificial life, and also too with like artificial intelligence too is affecting also what we hear too. Like there's sometimes where you're listening to music and it's like, did AI make this? Right? We're getting so disconnected from natural things. And I think that's why we feel like very like chaotic and odd on the inside and feeling very just like I keep saying like dissociating or disconnecting because of the world, the synthetic artificial world that's really set up for us. And I think that's why we also get confused of like what's intuition and what's anxiety. And one of the things, like you said, you could start doing is like really getting like aware and observant, like we talked about before, right? Of like, what are we taking in with like all of our senses, right? What is the music that we're listening to? Are we going outside? The screen time that we have, the smells that we have, the food that we eat, it affects us. Like our whole body is one whole system, just like we're all interconnected to each other. Everything in our body is all interconnected. I mean, it's the universal collective in general. Like we're all connected. And so paying attention to what we're absorbing on a daily basis, right, can also affect how we connect on the inside. So is there any kind of, maybe different things that people can look in their daily routines to start like maybe discerning things better in order to connect with their intuition, their spirituality better?
I think the key word would be resonance.
Yeah, that's a good word.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a really good word because it is not like right or wrong. It is like taking the inventory. What are you resonating with today, right now? And be really honest. So let's just say, like you talked about, okay, which songs, which food, which friends, which TV shows, and really see it because that is the resonance of your signature, your truthful signature right now. And
Mm-hmm.
if you want to evolve in intuitive senses, you have to evolve on all levels. So if you don't resonate with that group of people or that music, then stop. I mean, it's a lot of food also resonate, right? So it's like they even have a vibrational frequency, like can of food versus a tomato, leaf of basil, so on and so forth. They all vibrate in a different level. So the more vibrational frequency you ingesting, the more higher vibrational frequency you will be emitting. And then you're going to be resonating with that kind of a frequency, more life.
Mm-hmm.
The nature resonates very differently. So when we are, like you said, I like how you're saying this, we're so disconnected. We kind of like constantly are putzing around from one world to another world.
Mm-hmm.
And when we finally get to the nature, it's really hard sometimes because you have to make yourself put your boots on, put your jacket on, go out there. And it's just so much easier to flop front of the TV because you resonate all day with that. But
Mm-hmm.
stepping outside of the resonance and go into your nature, it
Mm-hmm.
will again elevate you, right? And so finding those times more and more and bring nature in. I always tell people, especially when they live in the big cities, bring nature in,
Mm-hmm.
have wooden furniture, have salt, the salt lamps, have crystals around, buy yourself flowers, invite the frequency of earth inside as much as
Mm-hmm.
possible and recognize it because then again, the web of life, it gets connected with your senses. So it's just like you talk about little gratitude, like have a gratitude for the fact that you bought yourself these beautiful flowers and
Mm-hmm.
where they came from. And they came all the way to your living room or kitchen, and then they are exuding this vibrational frequency. So these are the things that elevate our consciousness, elevate our resonance, and we slowly also can elevate our intuition because
Yeah.
the intuitive elements goes to the cosmos, right? So right now we are talking about how we connecting with ourselves and how we connecting with the brothers and sisters around us. But how about our nations? How about the different worlds out there? That's also based on intuitive senses. And we don't even have the luxury to tap into it if we are having our heads in our artificial intelligence day in, day out.
Yeah. And I love how you said too that like when we're trying to connect with ourselves and like drowning out all the noise, it's so important to, I love how you're saying like tuning into the different frequencies, right? It's like a radio signal. So like let's say you've been staring at your phone all day and it's easier to lay on the couch and watch TV because you've been in that same frequency all day, right? So you're going to stay there. And I love that you said that if you want to up the ante on your frequency, you have to then input the actions to get you there. So, like I said, if it's you going outside for maybe 10 minutes and getting that sunlight and that vitamin D, which I will tell you, today I was at work and I was feeling kind of sluggish and mad today. It's been cold. I live in upstate New York and I had outdoor recess. And I was actually excited for outdoor recess because I was like, oh, I get to go outside, get some fresh air. And there was a bench and I sat there and I literally told my students, I'm like, everyone, I'm sitting here, but I'm getting my vitamin D. Like I need to wake up. And I sat there and it was like 20 minutes of recess. I sat in literally direct sunlight. And then I went back into the building for my afternoon classes and I felt so much better. Just that little tiny moment. But because I knew how can I tap into a better frequency? How can I feel better right now? It could be as simple as that. And so when you want to tap into the feeling better in those better frequencies, is doing, we all know the right things to do to heal our intuition, heal our spirituality, our body, our mind, our soul. We know the things, we have so much information, we know the right things to do, but it's having the energy and the frequency to do it to make our lives better. And I love how you said, like, yeah, like maybe you have to put on your boots and put on your jacket to go outside, but that's the energetic step to get to that next level. Because we can always just stay inside, lay down, and doom scroll and stay in kind of that very low frequency. I loved learning about how different actions have different modes of frequency. Like even connecting with people, like watching TV together as like a couple is like one of the lowest frequencies you could do to really like quote unquote connect. So learning different actions, that's going to raise your vibration and make you feel better. And once you start doing those actions, you're in that higher frequency to then maybe start listening and seeing and paying attention to the different frequencies that are around you. Like one of the things that stood out to me when I was connecting with my spirituality was I remember my friend telling me about angel numbers. And it's like if you ever wanted clarity about something, you can pay attention and there's angel numbers, these frequencies everywhere that you look. And I would see them all the time and how like the 111, the 222, 333, 444 would always show up for me as I was thinking something. And I was like, wait, what was I just thinking about? And then I was like, oh, I just saw 111. That's like opening opportunities and things like that. Or, 444 was like someone, your guardian angels with you. You're making the right decision. And being like aware of those frequencies, I would get that, like you said, a little tap of validation when
Yeah.
you're thinking about something. And you start to realize those things when you're tapping into, right, those higher frequencies, because you're doing the actions that are going to get there. So what are some other types of actions that we can do on a daily basis to really raise our frequency to connect with our intuition?
If if there are people who do not have ability to go outside,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they're in a hospital or maybe they just can't leave.
Right.
Our mind does not know the difference, right? So you can put images,
Mm-hmm.
pictures of the beach or the mountains, and surround yourself again with images, with the symbolism that would bring you into those moments. So that's another way to elevate your consciousness and energy, especially movement,
Mm-hmm.
as much as possible. Just if you move your energy, you create energy. That's just like, and I like how you said you need to bring the effort in. Nothing's going to happen with you just dream around. You
Mm-hmm.
have to take the action. And what do you want to do? Like, what is your goal? People would like to be intuitive, but they already are. They
Mm-hmm.
already are. This is within you that you are not intuitive. So just embracing that aspect of it and just kind of like, I'm smart. I
Mm-hmm.
believe that all children are geniuses. They really are. Just
Mm-hmm.
teachers just don't see that
Mm-hmm.
in them,
Yep.
right? It's just like the same thing with intuition. It's just if you can bring more those senses to almost like a reawaken them, and how? Well, again, depends like what you doing, like where, like for example, I talk about that the most intuitive people are nurses and stockbrokers
Mm.
and police
Use
officers.
intuition a lot in those fields.
Yes. So because you have to save lives, you have to
Mm-hmm.
make decisions on somebody else's money.
Mm-hmm.
And as a police officers, you have to think one step ahead of the criminal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, criminals are also very intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just to see that these people, that's just who they are. Like they probably don't even think about that, but that's
Mm-hmm.
that's how they are within themselves at all times. They have that relationship. It's not separate. It's just constantly communicating with their senses.
Yeah. And I love that, just to piggyback from a while ago, as a teacher myself, as adults, we second guess ourselves so much that we lose track of like our intuition, because we're always taught, like even from when we're young, it's always like, double check it. Are you sure about that? Double check your work, make sure to look it over. And I remember listening to another podcast and they were saying how like adults, like you said, well-meaning, right? You just want to make sure that you're sure about this. Like that's nothing in, malice at all, but actually we didn't realize that like we were teaching ourselves to second guess ourselves to then receive external validation if I'm right or not, and looking to see external validation that I got it right rather than my own internal, I think like you said before, really creates the start of that disconnect. And that's why now we're in like our 20s, 30s, and 40s trying to refigure it out again, because we were taught to always second guess, double check. Are you sure about that? Like even making decisions today as adults, like, doing milestones. Everyone's like, are you sure about that? Did you double check it? Like we take away like our autonomy, right? And so really standing firm with yourself and being like, no, like I know what I'm doing. Like one of the affirmations that I say, and I think that's, another way to, those actions that you said to do to connect with yourself again, is doing those affirmations, right? I am intelligent. I do know what I'm doing, like that sort of thing, because that way it instills within your mind and your soul that like you do know what you're doing. You are an intelligent person and you should trust like what you know, because like we all know that feeling, right? When we have to make a decision about something, like, no, but I feel it and I know it. Like when you have such a strong sensation, like that's the answer. And so to really encourage ourselves, right, when we do feel like that, especially when we're making those like big life decisions. Like when I was moving, I used to live on Long Island and I moved to upstate New York, and I did an interview for the school that I work at now. The minute I turned into that parking lot, I got that feeling. I was like, no, this is it. This is the spot. And then I did my whole interview and I left the interview and I said, like, this is where I'm going to work. I know for a fact, like, this is where I'm going to work and we're going to move up here. And this is where I'm going to, continue my teaching career. And, I would say within the week, and then I got the job offer. Like, I was so like, I don't want to work anywhere else. I didn't even look like on any job websites. Like I knew. So like when you have that feeling, like keep encouraging yourself to hold on because that's your intuition, and you kind of get used to that sensation when you keep validating yourself.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Yeah.
I lost my thought. I was going to say something and then I lost my thought on that.
It's okay. That happens to me all
I
the
was like
time.
listening to your story.
Like, do you also encourage people like to maybe write down when they have like those gut feelings and being like, just like you said before, like keep those journals of those things to keep validating those experiences?
The one thing I did want to say, because again, you are a teacher, is that from your experience, do you feel when you give the children tests that they know the first answer is always the right answer?
Mm-hmm. I always say,
Mhm.
like, especially with multiple choice, I tell
Mhm.
them every time before they take the test, I'm like, trust your gut. Because there's so many times I grade the test and they circle the correct answer first and I see the erase and then they recircle something. I always tell them during multiple choice, you trust your gut.
Yeah.
It's the gut feeling. That's the one that you circled. And then just leave it. Because that's what happens. I literally can see kids like overthinking questions and like, no, you know this. Go with your gut feeling on the answer and circle it. That's what I tell them.
Yes. And that's kind of where I was heading. Like we
Mm-hmm.
know the
Yeah.
first feeling is the right, again, remember 6 seconds. Your heart knows before.
Mm-hmm.
If you get into your head, you're already wrong.
Yeah.
Like
We're
this
done.
doesn't know very much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not intuitively. This
Yeah.
one, 100%. If you can
Mm-hmm.
have that relationship, and it is part of that whole soul because the intuition is based not in a personality and ego, it is based in the soul. And a lot of people don't even know they have a soul. What is a soul? How do I find the soul? How do I connect with the soul? So that would be the first questions that they should be looking into. Like how did I connect with that essence of me?
Mm-hmm.
Where is it? Like, how does it communicate with us on a daily basis?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I would say is the soul, when we go in, day out in these situations, the soul is not interested in success and
Mm-hmm.
competition and right or wrong. It's not based on any of these values. Soul values is like empowerment. It is the good for all people involved. It's not about revenge. It is not about, none of that. So it's like if you are tapping into the integrity, into transparency, into the compassion, these are the languages of the soul. And this is where your successful and happy journey will be.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are basing your life on the other things that we have been doing for how many 200 years, and it's all about, the bigger home and the more money and all that, it's not where intuition lies. It really isn't. It is like the survival there, but it's not going to grow with you. It will not evolve. So that's not another way. If you ask in the intuitive senses, what is your a base resonance of that
Mm-hmm.
question?
Mm-hmm.
Because it will answer you right there. It's not going to answer you some high voltage answers. It will answer you right there. If you are asking, tarot cards, oh, is he cheating on me?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not what I'm talking about. That I'm not even interested in those kind of a conversations. That's not what that intuition I'm talking about is about. It's about the empowerment of your life journey and how we can be here for one another.
Yeah.
That's where intuition will be just in complete harmony with you. And
Yeah.
you're not gonna experience any anxiety because the
Mm-hmm.
soul will just like stupid, done, don't worry about it. It will be just kind of like that. You're gonna feel so much freer because these things that used to matter really don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love that you're talking about the difference between like the soul and the ego, because oftentimes the anxiety is the ego. That's where the anxiety comes from, is the ego. But the ease and it's going to be okay. You're going to figure it out is the soul. And I love how you gave words to it, like the compassion and empowerment and like serving others is the soul, while
Mhm.
the ego is heavily attached to like the material things, the buying the bigger house, the making the more money, like the being the most successful or the most popular. That's all material world. That is all the ego. All our soul wants for us, right, is to, have the human experience, right? Because that's what we're all here to do. Because that's how we learn. That's how our soul grows and evolves, right? and it's learning the lessons, right? The intuition is all about growing and learning and making the mistakes and giving yourself grace or others grace and showing that compassion and just learning and keep growing. Where the ego is that like that kind of that fixed mindset of like, don't make mistakes, the fear of failure, judgment. That's all the ego stuff that doesn't really matter. And
Yeah.
so learning, like you said, how to discern between the two. And your intuition, everyone's like, yeah, it's like the reminder, but tell me when your intuition's like for real, be like, no, like you said, like, nope, stupid, don't even worry about it. Like there's nothing to you're like, you're going to be okay. You're going to be fine. Like sometimes like, if I get too much in my head, like I can like feel my soul yelling at me like, Allie, what are you doing? Nope, we're done. Don't even worry about that. Like that's out of sight, out of mind. Like don't even put a second thought to it. Because like you said, your soul wants the ease, the okayness, that you're going to be safe and everything's going to work out. So I mean, Lenka, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your wonderful expertise. You know, with intuition, we could talk for like 5 more hours. Like, it's such a great and such a like right. It's such an interesting conversation because it's just so that skill is just so within all of us, and it's all about that rediscovery, like not like discovering or rediscovering, because like you said, we have it within us. So, where
Mhm.
can the Growth Mindset Gang find you, follow you, all those great things?
Well, I'll make it really easy. Everything is on my website, lenka.org.
Mhm.
I do have some social media, Instagram and TikTok and Twitter and things like that. But it's the easiest probably to go to my website and go from there. And people can also find my book on Amazon or also on my website as well.
Amazing. And I'll be linking that all in the show notes. And Lenka, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Allie.